Hi guys, it's Michelle, and today's video is going to be yet another reincarnations story video for you guys. I think reincarnation is one of the freakiest things. I know a lot of people find a lot of peace in it, and they love the idea of reincarnation, and it can be such a beautiful thing. Don't get me wrong, but it scares the hell out of me. Like, if my child came to me and was like, hey, I remember dying before, I would be like, you're kicked out. I'm scared of you. You're a ghost. So that's just my personal opinion on that, but let me know. All right, the first instance of reincarnation that I want to talk about is the story of Barbara Carlin, who remembers her life as Anne Frank. Now, I'm gonna put time, like chapters on this video because I told this story like 7 or 8 years ago, something dramatic like that. And in case you have been subscribed to me for that long and you don't want to hear it again, you can skip it. But a lot of people have been sending me this case on TikTok, and I was like, girl, I did that like 10 years ago. But it is, to be fair, one of the most interesting cases of reincarnation that I have ever seen, so let's get into it. So Barbara Carlin was born on May 24th of 1954 in Sweden. As a child, she was super into poetry. She loved writing ever since a very young age. But when Barbara was just 2 years old, she began having nightmares and talking about a past life. Barbara actually didn't know what the past life that she was remembering was because she was only 2 years old at the time. Obviously, she's not in school. She just knew that she was named Anne in a past life and that this was not the first time that she had lived before. But at that point, she obviously had never heard of the story of Anne Frank, and so she had no real connection to what her past life was other than that her name was Anne. And she would tell her parents this, but her parents just wrote it off as her imagination because obviously she wasn't going to them saying, hey, I'm Anne Frank, where that would be obviously a name that they would know and recognize. But she just seemed to be talking about a past life, and she would have pretty intense nightmares about this past life. But ultimately, it wasn't until Barbara was in school when she was learning about the Holocaust and learned about Anne Frank and just knew in her heart of hearts that that was her in her past life. Once Barbara began claiming that she was Anne Frank, obviously people thought that she was a little crazy. Her parents just kind of chalked it up once again to her imagination, and they didn't really think too much of it until the family visited Amsterdam. She knew the exact way to go to get to the Anne Frank house and was able to perfectly map out the directions. Like, again, she's 10 years old. I barely know how to get from point A to point B, honestly, most days, so it's pretty remarkable that this girl knew how to get to a place that she theoretically has never been before. And not only that, but upon arriving to the Anne Frank house, I guess throughout the years there had been some alterations made that Barbara pointed out and noticed. She claimed immediately that the front steps had been changed since the time of Anne Frank and since the time that she lived there as Anne Frank. And it's particularly striking because she had never been to the house before in this lifetime, and not a lot of people knew that they did in fact change the step. That her family actually had to ask the workers at the Anne Frank house if the stairs had changed since Anne Frank lived there, and they had. So this is pretty remarkable in my opinion because this was the 1970s at this point, before the internet. So it's not like something that she would just be able to look up and have access to easily. Barbara was also just very enamored with the Anne Frank house. She knew exactly where everything was. She kept pointing to things and saying, this is different or this is the same. And then once she got to Anne's room, she expected to see the wall covered in photographs because that's what Anne put on the wall. But the photographs were gone, and this actually made Barbara very, very upset. So her mother asked the tour guide, like, did there used to be photos on this wall? And they said, yes, but they actually had to remove them so that they could preserve them because people were taking them and touching them. So now they were kept behind glass, and there's just no way that this girl would have known that unless she was Anne Frank, which is a crazy thing to say. So like I said, Barbara's parents were initially pretty skeptical about her remembering her past life as Anne Frank. They were just like, girl, okay. Like, kind of just let it be chalked up to her imagination. But after visiting Amsterdam and the Anne Frank house and the way that she knew her way around the town that she had never been to, Barbara's parents really could not ignore this anymore. This was something that was very, very, very there, and it was clear to them that it was a case of reincarnation, and that perhaps Barbaro had actually been and lived life as Anne Frank. Barbaro's mother in particular really started to accept that Barbaro remembered her life as Anne, and this visit to the Anne Frank house was very transformative for their family. Because at the end of the day, a lot of children will have past life memories that they never get to connect to a specific person, because obviously not most people are famous and have just that kind of information readily available to them. But because Anne Frank was such a famous story, it led Barbaro to be able to connect with her past life and even her past relatives, which is pretty crazy. So throughout Barbaro's life, she actually had a pretty decent literary career, which is interesting, obviously, because obviously Anne Frank loved to write, the Diary of Anne Frank. So she wrote a lot of books and also talked about her experience as Anne Frank and having these past life memories that were just inexplicable, other than that she was Anne Frank. A really pivotal moment for Barbaro was the moment that she got to meet Buddy Elias, who was Anne Frank's cousin. This was Anne's last living relative at the time, and he was the president of the Anne Frank Foundation. And when they met, it was actually orchestrated through Barbaro's publisher, who decided to keep who Buddy was a secret when they met. But when Barbaro and Buddy Elias got together, it very much was a super emotional reconnection, and she knew exactly who he was. She knew that that was her cousin, or at least Anne's cousin. Buddy Elias always claimed and supports the theory that this was actually Anne Frank reincarnated. He genuinely believes that that's his cousin, which is pretty crazy because a lot of the time you don't have these endorsements from the past life person's family being like, yeah, you know what, that is my cousin, that is my sister, whoever. That's pretty fucking insane. I think most people do believe this case specifically of reincarnation just because of how damning the evidence is. There is so much potential with this case, and it makes so much sense. And the fact that Buddy was able to corroborate Barbaro's stories and believes that that actually is his cousin Anne Frank is pretty insane. So I don't know, I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this, because this is like the one case of reincarnation that I just 100,000% believe in. But let me know your thoughts. All right, the next case of reincarnation I want to talk about is more of a conspiracy theory. A lot of people recently have been actually not even recently, they've been kind of talking about it forever, but I would say I've been seeing this on TikTok a lot recently, which is the conspiracy theory that Ariana Grande is actually Audrey Hepburn reincarnated. I think there's quite a few different reasons as to why people think this. I would say I don't know that it's true because it doesn't seem like Ariana has any actual past life memories of Audrey Hepburn, but Ariana has always admired Audrey, and I don't know. So I guess that's interesting, but it's also not that crazy. But in my opinion, it's because they look so much alike. Their styles are so similar. Their face structures, I don't know. I just feel like Ariana needs to play Audrey Hepburn in some sort of biopic because they look strikingly similar in my opinion. Ariana's style also seems to be heavily influenced by Audrey Hepburn, whether, I don't know, it's on purpose or not, I'm unsure. But they do have very elegant and very similar fashion senses in my opinion, but also their face structure is really what's damning to me. And also, I think it's interesting that Audrey Hepburn died in January of 1993 and Ariana Grande was born in June of 1993. So therefore, it is possible. I also think that a lot of Ariana's and Audrey's, the way that they speak and their cadence is quite similar, but also it could be that Ariana is like inspired by Audrey Hepburn. So I don't know. Let me know if you guys believe it. I think it's an interesting theory and I think it's fun because they look alike. And if I was Ariana, I would literally be like, yeah, I'm Audrey Hepburn reincarnated. And that's the tea. But let me know your guys' thoughts. Although I feel like a lot of people don't like Ariana and a lot of people are very protective of Audrey Hepburn. So I feel like people would be like, she could never be Audrey Hepburn. And I'm like, chill out. They look the exact same to me. Like, they look so alike. All right, the next case of reincarnation is some of my favorite type of cases, which is where people remember their past life as one of their other family members, which is really interesting to me. So this boy named Gus Taylor allegedly remembers his past life as his late grandfather. So Gus Taylor was born a year after his grandfather Augie passed away, and his parents, Ron and Rebecca Taylor, began to notice some unusual behaviors within Gus at just 18 months old. He had the classic reincarnated children symptoms like high anxiety and really scary nightmares. Gus's parents didn't really think too much of it until Gus was about 2 years old, and he would say to his father, you know, when I was your age, I used to change your diapers. What do you mean by that? Like, if my kid said that to me, I'm burning the house down. Like, not to be dramatic, but what else do you do? Again, at first, his parents just kind of chalked it up to being imagination until one day when Gus was 4 years old and the family was looking through a photo album that had pictures of his grandfather, Augie, in the photos. And he pointed directly at his grandfather and said, "That's me." And again, this is a man that he never met because the man died a year before Gus was even born. This obviously shocked his parents, but the thing that happened next that they were just unable to write off was actually freaking terrifying. So they were at a family dinner and the topic of Augie, their grandfather's siblings, came up. And Gus talked about how his grandfather had a sister who was murdered, which this revelation shocked the hell out of the family because they had never told Gus about his grandfather's sister being murdered. Like, this was a family secret that he had never discussed in front of Gus. He talked about her death by saying, quote, "Yeah, she turned into a fish. She died. Some bad guys, ... It was just a really cryptic reference because Augie's sister had been murdered and she was dumped into the San Francisco Bay. Throughout Gus's early life, he continued with these different stories and talking about his past life as his grandfather. And he even said that when we die, we get to come back. And he elaborated on the idea that he had received a ticket from God and was allowed to return as Gus. So obviously all of this is incredibly strange and it can't really just be chalked up to Gus's imagination when what he is saying is corroborated by facts that the family knew, which is just so insane. And there are so many instances of reincarnation stories that involve another family member, and I think those are by far the most interesting because I mean, I think that would be like the coolest / most comforting thing. Like, obviously, if you lose someone close to you and then they come back as your child or your grandchild, it would be pretty cool. Like, honestly, like, that would be kind of nuts. It would freak me out, don't get me wrong, but it would be comforting in some ways. So, I don't know, do you believe it, or do you have any stories similar? Let me know. When you can connect a person who's claiming that they remember their past life to the actual human being, and you get their family members involved and even they believe it, it gets just such a different layer of interesting to me that maybe I'm not that scared of reincarnation after all. Maybe it is beautiful. I just don't want to be that. Like, I don't want to be reincarnated. I think it would be cool to be around, but it freaks me out still. But I don't know. Either way, that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of these reincarnation stories. And if you have any reincarnation stories, like personal one, please let me know in the comments because I love reading them. And I'm sure you guys love reading them too. So let's chat about it in the comments. But that is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And subscribe for new videos every week. And I will see you guys later. Bye.